I have Nate Vollbrecht in the studio today. Nate from TSI Core, welcome to the show, my dude.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you making the trip over and the trip in. I'm anxious to catch up with you because I haven't talked to you since the Fast and Furious California Range weekend that we went through. That was very intense just in terms of the itinerary and all the things I know you were trying to get done. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about a couple of those things, like having to unload and load up the damn truck with all the stuff.
Yeah.
And me trying to kind of get around and do the things we were doing kind of with the sponsor and the booth and all that stuff. So good to get in front of you, man.
Yeah, it's been a while, but it's good.
It is, man. Tell me what you've been up to.
Nothing. California Range Week was good. That's kind of a good close out to the end of the year. That was my second year doing it. But since then, just kind of went through the holidays with the family, re-gearing for 2023, and then just starting the grind for this year, you know?
Yeah, what does the grind look like? So, I mean, right out of the gate, when you're, your day job is as a first responder. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, I work. I'm a fireman around the area in the state.
Well, let's talk about it. So it's like for a municipal agency, right? Yeah. So you're working like inner city type stuff. It's not super rural or way out in the wilderness or whatever. So I imagine, and I know where you're working, and I know you guys are pretty busy.
Yeah,
you guys get a lot of fires out there. Higher percentage of fires than a lot of other places in the state, and also obviously I know there's a lot of medical calls. The last couple months in California have been a little wild. And I actually drove through the Central Valley right after New Year's when we were getting all that rain, those crazy storms.
Yeah.
The first big gnarly storm that kind of worked its way through here. And I was coming down out of Kirkwood, which would have been out of the east, or the Western Sierras.
Yep.
Dude, like the whole state had water everywhere and a lot of people were really suffering. How did that impact you guys where you're at in the state?
So we operate like in the valley. Yes. There's a lot of flooding, Sacramento, south, all the way Oak Grove, down actually Stanislaus County.
Yeah, it was a mess, man.
A lot. Flooding for freeways, trees down on people's houses. The wind, the storm was a very busy few weeks during the storm for sure. There's a lot of deployments of swiftwater rescue teams to go for help flood rescues and get people out where they need to be. A lot of rescues up north in Sacramento area, helicopter rescues. Got a few buddies up there that were doing some of those things along the American River and those kind of things. So the first of the year, I guess I could say would be busy for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I'm sure there's a bunch of overtime and just logistics things that the departments just as a whole, and I've talked to some of my other buddies in the game, just trying to get people where they need to be. It never ceases to amaze me. I mean, you can do your best. I don't want to talk about this, but the swiftness, going back to Swift, at which the storm hit, but also we had a lot of time knowing that, hey, this shit's coming, right? But the swiftness in which it came and how fast it caught people off guard was a little surprising to me. I grew up in California, and it used to rain like this pretty frequently. But the other crazy part to me is we've really done nothing from an infrastructure perspective to prepare ourselves for historically what ends up happening here anyway. Yes, we've been in a quote unquote drought for a while, but this shit got out of control fast. And you're just talking about we were doing a lot of rescues of people that really weren't prepared for that or had no idea they weren't prepared for it coming into it.
Yeah.
You want to give me your take on that? Because to me, this is mind blowing.
Preparedness about how it hit some certain people. So I remember when I was a younger kid, I grew up here, and in Tracy, the levee broke and then flooded all the houses south of would that be 580 or whatever it is over there. And I remember that as a kid. And since then, they've done a lot of structure or levee restructuring and kind of built everything up so it doesn't really happen again. And that was just in our area. And of course, there's a million miles of levees and waterways and systems.
All the way up and down the state, man. Yeah.
Right. So that probably needed attention. So, and some people live in flood areas. Some people don't. And even where I live, I had no issues. Wasn't even worried.
Same.
At all. And I live alongside of a river. But yeah, I didn't have any issues like some other people that I know had for sure. So as far as people might kept catching people off guard. I mean, maybe it's a communication thing with the news and trying to not let certain information out, or maybe they, underestimated it, or maybe just some people weren't in tune to what's going on around them and kind of just blinded,
Yeah. So like you, look, we had some trees down around the neighborhood, and, power was out one day, and one day.
Right.
But it wasn't even a day. It was for a few hours. But if you went 20 miles either direction, not even that far. I mean, you could go just a few miles to some of our local neighborhoods. There's pockets, right? And there's these spots where people were really getting hammered. I mean, whether it's standing water or, if you just go over the mountain or the hills here, whatever you want to call it, over into Santa Cruz, it's 30 miles away. And parts of Santa Cruz were just getting destroyed, the Capitola area or whatever. And then we were seeing what was happening in the valley. And I was way east when all this stuff was happening. I was seeing all the snow and the cold weather and the ice and so forth. And it never, like I said, it never ceases to amaze me every couple of years. And by the way, we were seeing stuff happening on the East Coast just prior to that. People like in Buffalo, New York, and upstate New York, they were getting just hammered by the ice and stuff. I sit back and I go, okay, so you can't predict the weather all the time, but you kind of can. And this is something that kind of happens. Like, what can you do to be better prepared? And I wonder for you, like, you didn't really have any issues, but had shit hit the fan for you, like, do you feel like your family and yourself, your loved ones are prepared to handle business if necessary? And if so, what are the things you've done to prepare for that?
Yeah, so a big thing is, and part of what I do is we like to, being a first responder as a fireman, we like to solve problems and think ahead, so we can kind of be ahead of the game and kind of not get caught off on our heels, So really paying attention to what's going on around you, and then being self-reliant as far as, hey, things that you can take into account to be prepared. Like, obviously we can talk about the pandemic stuff, about buying and storing and all that other kind of stuff. But and the reality is, just being able to know that, one, my family's good. I don't live very far from where I work.
Okay.
So, being away from home when I'm at work, and I can come home if I need to for any kind of disaster if I had to.
That's a thing, man. As a firefighter,
for sure.
I mean, a lot, because I know a lot of officers that work here in the Bay Area that don't live in the Bay Area. Yeah, they live somewhere far away. Like whether firefighters or officers, like they're literally hours from home. Yeah, if something goes down. So that's a really good point I hadn't really thought of.
And I actually just watched a documentary on the Paradise Fire recently. It was a firsthand accounts of some of the the CAL FIRE guys, and then some of the school teachers about what happened. And the volunteer firefighters that were up there when the fire started, like, I got to go in, we got a fire, and then it quickly snowballed into, hey, we got to get everybody out now. And then some of the guys that left home, their wife's like, I got to go to work for a little bit. And then now their families are back trying to pack everything up and get out. And while, the firemen's trying to help everybody else.
Help everybody else. Yeah, man.
So that's very difficult too, if something natural, disaster like that, to kind of balance on, like, obviously you have a dedication to serve the community and then your family as well. So one big thing too is preparing your family to say, hey, if something were to happen, this is probably going to be our plan. And if we're separated, this is what we're going to do. Or, just make a plan ahead of time in case something happens. It's the best thing.
Huge missing piece. And that dawned on me kind of, well, a lot of people heard my story about how I really started to kick my training up and think about being prepared a little differently than I had before. And the thing that hit me the hardest in all of it, in terms of what I was most unprepared with, it wasn't the firearms training, it wasn't the medical, it wasn't the mobility piece, it wasn't mindset, it wasn't, there's all these pillars, right, that we think about when we think about being prepared. It was the fact that I was having all those conversations with my friends, or maybe inside my little circle or whatever. I had these conversations, like I said, in my head, and I was going through my own checklist, but I was not having these conversations around the dinner table or in the car ride, or when, something would happen, an event would happen, maybe like in current events, like in the news or something, to really sit down and go, hey, let's talk about what happened here and how would we respond to that, or what would we do in these situations. That one hit me hard, like to the extent, like, I felt shame, I felt guilt about it, and I was like, God, if we'd been caught in that situation, and I felt like I knew what I was doing, but nobody else did. Now, how would I go through my life, the rest of my life, how could I put my head on my pillow at the end of the night, knowing that I never even had the conversation with anybody else, which is why we're here talking right now. So, having those plans. I mean, so you got family and you're having these conversations. Like, what's your recommendation on how to maybe start one of those conversations? And how to have it, because a lot of people are like, dude, it's not doomsday. The end of the world isn't coming. I'm like, well, we just spent the first 5 minutes of this conversation talking about like it felt like that for a lot of people in a lot of places.
Yeah. So I think too, and it not like a doomsday prepper kind of thing, but like in reality is like logistically, if something just simple as the power going out. For me, I live out in the country, so I run off a well, which is electricity. So if I don't have electricity, I don't have water. Right. So that's one aspect of me being out away from people, which is good, but there's something that logistically I need to be prepared for, a generator, whatever the case. Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on everybody of what exactly your needs are, especially with family and if you're not home and something happens. But it's one of those things where, hey, what's important to us? What do we need to be comfortable? We don't need to go anywhere unless we're forced to for whatever reason. And then that can branch off to what does that look like logistically? If what are we doing? But the reality is, I truly believe as long as you're sustainable in your home, comfort of your home, you have everything you need. And if you need to take care of electricity or water, whatever the case is, the basic stuff, you can either, if for a natural disaster we're talking about, just wait it through or kind of work through it and make sure you have everything you need to get you through that there. So it's something simple and basic. It doesn't have to be like all this, prepper stuff of this, all that kind of stuff. So
I know there's a negative
simple.
Yeah, if there's a negative connotation and people overcomplicate the shit out of it all the time, that's the thing that, again, sort of blows my mind. It's mind blowing to me. It was like, I'm watching you go through all this stuff and it's awful, right? I don't want people to have to go through that, being displaced or trying to figure it out, but a little thinking about it, and maybe just this conversation that you're having around the house with your family or your wife, your kids, your partner, whoever, your neighbors even, like if this happens, let's just, let's have a little plan here,
Yeah. And then we got guys at work that live up in the hills, like in Auburn. And when fire rolled through there around close to it earlier last year, I think. Last year.
Yeah, it was happening last year.
So they
seems like it happens every year up there.
Yeah. They live knowing, especially he's a fireman that I work with too. So he is experienced one in that realm of the world of wildland fire and firefighting in general. So with the family, you have a plan like, hey, he packed up his family, took off, and he's like, I'm staying back. So he has the experience to know good versus bad situations, but also what he needs to do to protect the home as far as, clearing whatever he can. And it's a preventative thing. So before a fire even starts, he's trying to have stuff cleared away from his house and all that in case something does happen. But so his situation obviously is different, but he already had that plan. Fire rolled through, he stayed home, and the family came back, and it was all
everything
good.
was good. Yeah. I mean, you're right. There is no one size fits all, right? It's a lot of factors here. Other than some basics, I mean, we just kind of mentioned a few of the pillars. Let's transition here real quick and kind of get into what you're doing with TSI, because I want to talk to you about I want to talk very specifically actually about your training philosophy and methodology. But to set this up, let's talk about TSI and what you're doing. And I think maybe we probably have to talk about your background a little bit outside of being a firefighter and how you got there. So start and finish however you like, man.
Well, TSI started organically. So probably 2013, which is going to be 10-year anniversary this year of the company, which is a good milestone for us.
That's awesome, yeah.
Yeah. We'll probably do like a rain day or something sometime this year.
You got to do something. Yeah. I'm horrible with that shit too, by the way. Like it just pops up and I'm like, oh, we had a birthday or we had an anniversary. I'm terrible about that.
Yeah. So
celebrate the wins.
I think actually, so TSI started, I had some experience in shooting prior to, I was in the military before that, but the company started in 2013 and I was a shooter and enjoyed taking a lot of classes and training. I had a little bit of experience in the military. And then it just kind of grew to probably like a lot of other friends and people around you. Like, hey, you're the expert gun guy. And they want to know stuff.
I totally get that. Yeah. I mean, that's how it started in the gym business for me. Right? It's like, all of a sudden people are coming to you with questions and you're trying to give answers and you're the guy.
Yeah.
Yep. Got it.
So easy day. Just always going to the range. People come out and shoot with you, and then you just have fun and hang out. And then more and more it kind of grew. And initially is just like, hey, well, let's just set one day, and whoever wants to come out, we'll just go and I'll teach you some stuff. And then that's basically where it started.
I love that.
Yeah. And then continued on and then caught momentum. And then I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Maybe I'll just start something. One, because it's fun and I like to shoot. Two, I like teaching in general. I like helping people progress. And then also, if I can make a little money, it can pay for my hobby, you know? So that's how it started. And it kind of grew to handgun stuff, CCW, concealed carry. So I provide concealed carry, the training for the counties that surround me.
You're quote unquote certified to provide that training.
Yeah, I'm what do they call it? A vendor, like per se, for the counties, for the sheriff's department, police departments, so they get on their list. But so handgun, basic handgun, all the way down from beginner only all female classes, which there is a market for.
For sure. We need more constructors to do that, man.
Yeah, sometimes it gets a bad rap from instructors. It's like, hey, the thought is not to single out women shooters. But,
totally get it, man. It's the same in exercise.
Yeah, sometimes they'd rather be more comfortable with a friend or a couple friends to go out and shoot and be, it's very it could be very stressful.
Give the people what they want, man. Yeah. If they're asking for that or they're suggesting that's what they want, I can make it happen. Mm-hmm. But to have other instructors shit on that, like, I think it's being pretty narrow-minded. Yeah. I mean, people want different things. So I understand that, hey, it's all inclusive. Let's make sure we're not singling anybody out. I totally get that. But sometimes, like, it's the business I run. Mm-hmm. You know, we have group classes, we have one-on-one training. Some people are just like, I do not want to be in a group class. For whatever their reasons are. Maybe they're feeling a little bit self-conscious. Maybe they're just nervous about being around other people. And maybe it's like, no, this is I want one-on-one time. Yeah. I don't want to share my time with anybody else. All those reasons are okay. It's the same on the other side. I would never do a one-on-one session. Like, that's just too much. Like, I don't need that. I don't want to be all eyes on me, that kind of thing too. So I think, people could be more open-minded about it. Anyway, so going back, this is a solid point. So you got some female-only safety and confidence type stuff? Yeah,
a beginner intro level stuff, couple hours on the range with a group of females, all the way to like initial basic first handgun class to, I mean, I've kind of reorganized my classes, my curriculum throughout the years, like handgun 1, handgun 2, rifle 1, rifle 2, and so on. I got to a point to where, I like teaching anybody that's willing to learn. I've done, like I said, from the intro female stuff to some CQB stuff to some, stop the bleed, the breaching stuff now, and everything in between. So my experience on all that kind of stuff is all from, stuff that I've learned, as training through either my professional career and then just sought out personal training from other instructors and things like that. Reading curriculum and books and more of like the psychology and all that other kind of stuff that goes into, stressful situations, I guess, how your body and mind reacts under stress. That's all interesting stuff to me. And that's a big relatable subject to anything, especially in defensive, defensive firearms world, I guess. So rifle, handgun, forcible entry, breaching stuff, just kind of a gamut of things that.
Yeah, you mentioned the last thing there was the breaching stuff, and people, maybe a lot of people listening, their ears perked up like, wait, what?
Yeah,
like breaching, because that's not something you see. You may take some CQB stuff, and they talk about door entry, or building entry, structure entry, things like that, depending on what level you're getting into and how often you're doing, who you're training with. There's a lot of stuff out there, man.
Yep.
Some's really great and some's not so great. But you mentioned the breaching stuff. What you're doing is unique. So when people hear breaching, it could be anything from, kicking in a door to explosives.
Yeah.
Right? Well, talk about what you're doing.
So
and how you're doing it.
Yeah, forcible entry and the breaching thing is I think it's relative. One, so there's mechanical breaching, there's ballistic breaching, explosive breaching. There's all kinds of different ones. But my thing is it's a small niche and there's other companies that are doing breaching and have been doing it for a little bit. But there's so many CQB courses out in the world right now, which is great. But when you do CQB stuff, you have to be able to get in through a door. And if you can't get in through the door, then all the other stuff, the CQB doesn't matter. So I think starting off or having this ability for anybody to come learn, then I think it's necessary because, again, if you can't get in the door, one, it depends on your job, your occupation. If you're going to go force your way into a door or building, you probably have that type of job or credentials to do that. But in another sense, if a civilian wants to go learn how to do CQB with night vision on, that's something that shouldn't be closed out to somebody. They may not necessarily use it, for the breaching side, but it's good to know. You never know. And it also gives you perspective, like how easy it actually is to break, to force a door for security reasons for your own home and other things like that.
So I have to tell you, I want to address a couple things there. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. One is what you just said there about you can get, everybody should be able to get exposure if they want the exposure, mm-hmm. right? And so there's not a lot of, there's gatekeeping in the sense of like, look, this is not for you because you need more training over here. Maybe mm-hmm. it's more fitness. Maybe it's more firearms training. Maybe it's something, right?
Yeah.
Before you get into this, what I'm saying is like, hey, look, if I want to do it, why shouldn't I be able to do it? Right. And you're going back to the CQB night vision, mm-hmm. Stuff. I think that's a really important point to make because I think people want to be trained, but they also want experiences. Mm-hmm. And in doing both, you learn things that you didn't know you would learn. That's maybe an obvious statement, but I think what hit me the most when I went through the breaching session with you was how easy it is to get into a freaking door.
Yeah.
It is so easy, but also how tough it could be if that door is shored up or depending on the configuration or what's happening on the other side of that door or whatever else. Those are the things that I really took away, just going, wow. Like, and then the last part of that is how practical or relevant is it for me? Mm-hmm. Well, how am I ever going to have to, bust through a door? I hope not.
Right.
I hope not. But now I know a few things and I have a few things under my belt. And I also understand how the tools work to some extent. I don't have a ton of training on it, just what I got from you. But more than that, like I know what it would take or how easy it would be for somebody else to get into a structure, my business, my house, my trailer, my motorhome, my whatever, that my parents' place, my brother's place, and for that matter, even just like into a toolbox or outside shed or something like that. Man, it was eye-opening.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought I knew some shit, but nope. Like I was blown away.
Yeah. I mean, we go into at work, obviously we do this every day. But you can go, there's so many things and aspects on how to force a door and then indicators of what to look for, different lock mechanisms, different barricade, drop bars and things like that. And there's most of the time there's signs and indicators to tell you what that is. And then that's where that part of it, if you're in that specific occupation, if you're a team guy going to serve a warrant on a commercial building, that's good stuff to know what those indicators are in your pre-planning to say, okay, I see this door. It's got these indicators. I see these carriage bolts on the outside of the door. It's probably got a drop bar, et cetera, for security, whatever. Different kinds of locks, padlocks for hockey puck locks, all these kind of things that talk about efficiency. If you know your craft, you can get through whatever door. The idea is to get through it most efficiently as possible.
Sure, yeah.
So recognizing the signs and the indicators is a huge thing. So
yeah, it's the awareness piece, and that's what I pulled away from it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I want to talk a little bit about some of the tools and the equipment you use in order to get it to actually teach this, so what people would see or what they should expect when they show up. But that awareness piece was the big takeaway for me. Mm-hmm. It was physical. Mm-hmm. It was cerebral. Like you just went through the problem solving skill that has to go into that. And it was fun. Mm-hmm. Like I really enjoyed it. I mean, we got to do some team stuff with, you could do it sort of solo and then you could do it with like a partner or even with teams, depending on what the assignment was that you were giving us at that particular time. So I had a lot of fun doing it, as well. I don't think it's for, when I say it's not for everybody, what I also took away from it is if you're showing up and you're out of shape, you're probably not going to have very much fun because it's work.
Oh, yeah.
Which I actually really loved. Yeah. Like I've been to a lot of courses before and done a lot of stuff on the range. This was taught at a range. This was really physical in a very appropriate kind of way.
Yeah.
And I think people got their eyes open real fast, especially after a very long day that day. And then they had to get up the next day and kind of do another class. So I like, that's kind of one of my take was the awareness piece and the fun. And again, there was this physical piece to it that really got me thinking about a few things, maybe a little bit differently, and how important training is, how important fitness is, understanding where your body is in space, how to use your body. And then more specifically, how would you apply the things that I learned to my training session to help me be better at these things. Right. So that was interesting to me.
Yeah. And I'm sure we might go into in a little bit, but the success factor formula, one of those factors is fitness. And maybe it's natural or common for me. I don't think about it too much, but to carry a gun, you have a responsibility, right? Either CCW every day, or protect your home or protect your family inside your home, or depending on your occupation, you have to have, the more physically fit you are, the better chance of success or survival you're going to have, not only for yourself, but for those around you, including your family too. So fitness is definitely a part of a responsibility that you have to have if you're going to have or carry a gun to use in defense.
Couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think you have, number one, you have a responsibility to yourself, right? And there should be some sense of duty, I think, that comes along with that. And you can define that probably a lot of ways, but it's not just about you. It's about the people around you and your community.
Exactly.
And being an asset versus a liability. And being able to step up when somebody else can't. Carry the load if necessary, literally and figuratively. So going, and I want to get into that because you have a really cool structure in terms of how you get people to be successful and you teach success. Before we get there, just with, again, people maybe that go to one of your courses and show up, like, what are they going to see when they get there? Because to me, this was impressive. This is not, we're pretending and using caution tape and cones. We'll talk about it.
For the preaching class specifically? Yeah. So first I got to give a shout out to Josh and Vince at Bear Training. Local guys to me. And so they provide the doors. They own Bear Training Solution. So we partnered with them. This would be our second year. So I partnered with them a couple years ago. And I believe that they have the best forcible entry training doors on the market. And they're expanding, there's some more things coming down later on. It's not just doors, but So anyways, shout out to those guys. So if you show up to a forcible entry course from me and working with Bear Training, we're going to have some different styles of doors to give you some different experience on a real door simulator. We didn't have a real door simulator with you last time, but the class before we had it. You could do commercials like these big framed out door props. They're heavy. They're durable. But they give you repeatable reps, which is the most important thing. Because when you have students that want to just force a door, reset, it has to last. So you'll see some doors, some tools that we'll lay out, some different kinds of tools that we can use to force the doors in different specific ways. And that's just the very, very fundamental, basic handset of mechanical breaching tools. Like I said before, there's different ballistic and explosive and
stuff. It should be that way, though. I mean, exactly. It's very basic. But for me, the new guy drinking from a fire hose, and all this stuff, I'm seeing, handling it, getting knowledge on it, literally trying to learn the names of this stuff, as part of the process, like walking out on the firearms range for the very first time going, okay, I know that's a gun, but I have no idea, the nuances or the specifics of that thing. That's what you're trying to take in on day one.
Yes. Right? Yeah. And it was difficult at CRW because the time constraints that everybody was.
It always is. Yeah.
Yeah. So trying to get because
the curriculum
in the course. The curriculum, there's a certain level where I need to make sure you guys are sufficient or appropriate in your skill level before we can move on to other things. And the biggest thing is safety.
Sure.
I need to know, because we're moving around, you're working with tools, doors, we got people around us, surrounding us, not surrounding like 360, but next to us while we're working with loaded firearms. Moving, so muzzle awareness, safety, actuation, all that kind of stuff. I have to make sure that you are proficient in those things because obviously people.
Yeah, safety should be number one.
Yeah. So in the beginning of the class is what, that's the focus, is make sure you guys are good. And then we can start to move on to the door stuff.
Good point.
Yes.
Very, very good point.
Yep.
Like, that's exactly what I remember. Like there was a brief, then we spent at least, I want to say we were at least 45 minutes to an hour kind of going through just what you could consider basics, and then you kind of building on those basics.
Yes.
And I recognize that right away as, for us, it's kind of a warm-up.
Yeah.
But for you, it's an evaluation.
Exactly.
Right. Yep. And obviously class size matters, and, who do you have there to help you if the class gets bigger and all that. But yeah, anytime you go to one of these range events where there's multiple, classes or sessions happening one day, you always feel like you're crammed for time, right? And the students feel that way too, I think. So I totally get you there. But anyway, so you mentioned the doors, the equipment. We're learning about that, and we were going to get reps.
Yes.
Which is an important part about having the right kind of equipment, right? And I mean, by the time we were done, I remember feeling like, okay, I've had plenty of reps on this. I was tired. Like there were several opportunities there. So anyway.
Taking reps. I mean, that was just one, and we only worked, there's different kind of doors, different ways to open it, inward swinging versus outward swinging. We only did inward swinging doors because one, it's probably maybe not necessarily the easiest, but it's the most basic. You only have two doors, inward swing or outward swing. Well, I guess you have more. You have pocket doors, sliding, all that kind of stuff. But in any case, the reason why I emphasize and breaking, slowing things down when you guys are getting individual reps is because it can make you or break you, and like you experience the physical fitness aspect of it. If you are having a hard time on a door, you're going to get gassed. So being able to kind of, because there's a procedure too on certain style of doors and set of moves. And I truly believe that it's for mechanical forcible entry with using, like, say, the Hallican bar or the Pro bar and the irons combined with like a sledgehammer or something like that. The idea is to be able to get through the door as quickly as possible. Because if you're messing with the door for 2-5 minutes trying to get through,
it's an eternity.
Yes.
It could be an eternity depending on what's on the other side of that door. Bad guy, fire, whatever.
So the only the thing about that is you have to get the experience with time on the tool. So the more you work with the tool and know how to use it, then the more efficiency and fast you can get through the door.
This is basics 101, right?
Yep. So continuous reps is good.
It's the same. I mean, no matter where you're coming at, whatever angle you're coming at, whether it's working out, firearms training, door entry, whatever, math.
Yep.
You gotta get reps. So let's talk about this real quick, because you're alluding to and getting into the essentially, philosophy and methodology and kind of the structure in which you teach with. And you mentioned the success formula.
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So one thing, and one thing I kind of wanted to bring to light and kind of emphasize on everybody, whatever they're interested in. They'll say, and for example, we're going to talk about firearms, right? So you want to be a successful firearm shooter. I've had this in my head, and I got it on paper recently, but it's a success factor formula. And what does that take to be successful? Like what factors do you need to have to be successful? If I want to be a good shooter, what's that going to be? So 1-on-1 is a skill set, and it's all going to depend on what your actual goal is. What's your success? Do I just want to be a shooter on the range that can fire accurately out to 25 yards, slow fire, exercising the fundamentals? Is that my goal? Well, what skills do I need to be proficient at to obtain that goal, right? So good at, grip, sights, trigger control, all that kind of stuff.
Fundamentals.
Yeah, exactly. If your success factor is something different to where you want to survive a gunfight, well, what does that look like? What kind of skill sets do you need to have? And that's all going to depend on where you find yourself in on the daily. So work, home, out and about, day, night, vehicle, all this kind of stuff.
It all matters.
So if I'm going to do in a vehicle, so just basic handgun skills. If I carry a gun every day, well, I need to be proficient in carrying a handgun, CCW wise. At night, I need to know low light, no light, because I might find myself in that situation. If I'm in a vehicle, do I know how to operate inside and around a vehicle using my firearm? And it can go on to night vision, depending on your occupation, right? So all those skills is something that you need to be proficient in, depending on what your success or what you want to do, right? So you have skill set. The other component is to fitness. And I'm going to ask you, how do you measure fitness?
Well, there's a lot of ways to measure that, right? I mean, it's endless, but it all depends on the goal.
Yeah.
And the human that's trying to perform it. Those are the two things. What is the goal and who's trying to do it?
Right. So we'll go simple, strength, stamina, speed, right?
That's fine.
There's things that goes into, diet and recovery and those kind of things.
They all matter.
Sleep, exactly. So if you were to take these, rate yourself, we'll say you can rate to, we'll say 100. If you give yourself 100. So if I give myself an 80 out of 100, for skill set, that's my number. For fitness, you're going to judge yourself. I'm like, well, maybe I'm a 60 or 70 as that on fitness. Mm-hmm. Well, those two are also multiplied by and the other part of the factor is mindset. So mindset for me is, experience or being able to make decisions, a way of thinking. So how do you gain knowledge? So you also do, educational. So reading books and documents to kind of gain a base knowledge of somebody else's experiences and their research. And you can read a ton of different aspects or from a ton of different documents about one subject from other people and get different opinions and kind of take what's relevant to you and then apply it to what you have.
So important.
The other part of that is experience. So you take your book smart and stuff you've learned and read in class or school or other things, and then you apply your experience to that. And then you can make your own, that's how you make decisions based on what you know and what you've experienced and gives you context. Mm-hmm. So you take mindset, multiply your skill set and your fitness and the way that you kind of look at those things, and then it just elevates and multiplies those numbers there. Now, all of that being said, there are things that I call variables, and that's opposition. So those are things that you cannot control. So if I'm going to draw my success, my goal is I want to draw a handgun and fire one round at a 3-inch dot at 15 yards, right? In less than, we'll say 2 seconds. Okay. So the skills that I need to do that are, one is being able to react to whatever the shot timer will say. Mm-hmm. If I'm wearing a holster, a duty holster, I need to establish my good grip, defeat my retention device, come up, make a good 2-hand grip, present to the target, prep the trigger, sights, confirm, and then press the shot in whatever X amount of time is, right?
In that order.
Exactly. So what are the variances that could go wrong with that are outside of your control? On a flat range is not much. It's something that you maybe are going too fast. Weather, rain.
It's arguably the most controllable environment,
exactly.
Right? Which is where you should start with this stuff, right? Yeah.
So if your successor will go to the opposite end. If you want to survive a gunfight, if you're at the ATM, we'll say, what variables are out of your control there? Day, night, weather, people around
you. Yeah,
exactly.
What's the background? Yeah.
So those are things that the variables that are opposition to impede your progress. So it's things that'll slow you down, and they could be minute, that is something small that's easy to overcome, or something like devastating that actually halts your progress. So if you take the factors, the top factors, your skill set plus your fitness multiplied by your mindset divided by your variables, gives you your success factor percentage, and the closest to 100% will give you what you believe, or hopefully, your highest chance of survival. But that being said, you could do everything right, be the most stud, peak performance physically, have the most skills, and then that one variable,
shit happens, man.
You won't survive. So keeping that in mind, but the idea is to be prepared and then have a self-evaluation of exploit your weaknesses. What am I skill set wise, or fitness wise, or educational wise? The way you think things and solve problems. That is to identify what your weaknesses are and work on those.
So let's talk about that, because that makes perfect sense. Everything you just talked about there is very logical, and I think anybody that's spent any time around, we're talking about shooting as the example here, can relate to this. That is not overly complicated. Mm-hmm. It's a little complex. It's not complicated. But I think people complicate the shit out of it, and they also get, this is something about the shooting, I'm starting to second guess my use of the term community, but let's just say the genre, right? It's an echo chamber. right? And a lot of people just like to go with what's comfortable. But there's also limitations like having range access. Where can I actually go to do my training at, and who can I actually do it with? Because I don't have access to ranges, and if I do, the only time I do is when this instructor's teaching, and so I get the same information all the time. I guess just looking across the board in that formula with those factors, if you look at the major components there, mindset, fitness, skill sets, where do you think people are lacking the most? When you're instructing a student, like what's the thing that pops up maybe the most commonly? And these are the controllable things,
right?
That prevents somebody from getting to a higher success factor percentage.
Well, I think anybody that attains training on their own dime is in the right mindset of like they're there to improve their skill set. So I don't necessarily think that's lacking, and I don't know where they're coming into the class of where they're at in their firearms training
journey.
career,
Yeah.
Right? So I can't say like the skill set is the thing where they're lacking, because that depends on each individual and where they're at, particularly at that time when they come to my class. Fitness is a personal discipline thing. If and everybody has their own style of what they think fit is. Ideally, you don't want to be in a position to where you cannot perform when you have to. So fitness is definitely maybe one of the things that most people, and it depends too on like most of the guys that come to the class and gals too, they may be in an occupation or they understand the responsibility, or they're learning and like newly understanding the responsibility that how important physical fitness is, especially if they take a class that's a little bit physically
more
demanding.
Physical,
yeah. So that is, I think, in that case is probably just a reminder. And then I think the mindset is probably one of the things that is mostly lacking, because it's something that maybe they don't know what they don't know, if that makes sense.
It does. So then there's a knowledge piece there alongside the mindset, because if you don't know what you don't know, how do you get in the right mindset?
Yes.
And let me bring something like in that dawned on me very early in when I was sort of uptaking my training and starting to take on different things and trying to build my own skill set alongside my mindset, which is really what got me to really pursue the skill sets, are you really ready to do this?
Yeah.
Like, are you really willing to engage somebody in the ultimate act of violence?
Yep.
If that's what you're out there to train for.
Yep.
Because if you're not there from a mindset piece, then your success factors percentage is going to be much lower than you think it might be. I don't care what kind of a shooter you are.
Yeah. Yep.
That was something that dawned on me right away. So nobody had ever challenged me with that in that way. I have been challenged in my life.
Yes.
In some very violent situations, but not to where like I have to take this person's life.
Yeah.
It was more like this is a test of wills and egos and, how many punches can you take in the face kind of thing. That's a little bit different than what we're talking about when we're talking about firearms.
Yeah.
And defensive firearms.
I think and this one thing I do in my concealed carry classes, because of the rifle classes and then like the more, we'll say, advanced handgun classes that I've taught, the shooters are pretty proficient. And I think they're at the right mindset to learn.
That's good. That's encouraging, man, to hear that. Yeah.
But the CCW stuff, a lot of times, and I have this requirement now of last, handful of years, that if you're coming to my class you got approved, you applied for your CCW. Hey, I got approved. I need to take the class. Well, it's like one of my first questions, like, what's your experience? Because the biggest thing is this CCW class should not be your first firearms class.
1000%.
Yeah.
This happens?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I guess I shouldn't be shocked.
Yeah.
But people are like, I think I should be carrying a gun, so I'm going to go down and apply for a CCW, yet I've never shot.
Yeah. Some of them have shot growing up hunting and whatever, but
that doesn't count.
Yeah. Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned. I mean, it does what it doesn't.
Yeah. So my own standards of, CCW, and a lot of times too, the question in the class is once the students have taken a class and relatively new to being prepared and all this kind of stuff is like, and I forget who said it, but ask yourself is in the PowerPoint. Ask yourself, are you willing when it comes down to it to be able to take a life to save a life? Not that that's the intent. The intent is to save somebody else, but if they die in the process, obviously that's what happens. But if you can really think about and ask yourself that. And then if 100%, yes, absolutely, then that's the right answer. And if not, then you
shouldn't be here.
Exactly. You need to find what you need to find out to learn more.
That's interesting. So you mentioned like fitness is a thing for a lot of people, but there's a certain group of people that it's there. Maybe they need to be, maybe they need a little inspiration sometime to stay up on top of it, but they understand it right, from a mindset perspective, whether or not they're executing or, their plan to stay fit, get fit, whatever, on a regular, consistent basis. To each his own, everybody kind of does their own thing. But it's the more of the mindset thing based on, I just don't know what I don't know yet. And so that comes with more training, more experiences.
Exposure.
Yeah, more exposure to different things, which, again, that's what I was saying about the whole breaching thing. Like, I got exposed to some stuff that helped me change my mindset on a lot of things. Not about how I'm going to kick down a door, right, or get through a door necessarily, but more like how can I secure my doors better so that somebody else can't do that so easily to it. So yeah, I get that. I get that. I guess as we're going down this learning sort of model that we're talking about and how to be successful. What are the things that you see people coming in with now, maybe versus a few years ago, from a mindset perspective, but also from a skill set perspective that they didn't have then that they do have now when they come to see you?
Well, it's hard. The time that we're in now for the skill set wise, a little interesting because the last 2021 or 2020 through 2021,
3 years. Yeah,
there's a big sway of new shooters that were like, hey, I feel like I need to get a firearm and then some training. So the skills that wave of new shooters came in is different because it's new and there was things that were going on in the world to where it kind of pushed him to like, hey, I think I need to start thinking about some things to protect myself in case something happens. But now it's I actually think and I don't know if it's I've kind of seen this and experienced this too. So I had mentioned that I did a lot of beginner classes before. I'll still do the women's only intro classes, and then I would do the basic handgun, and then I would go to just like a normal handgun, what I believe is normal, which isn't like anything crazy. But if I only offer those classes and those skill set handgun, skill set rifle classes, which isn't necessarily a beginning fundamentals class, the shooters that come to take that class is of a little bit more experience.
Higher level now.
Yes.
Because of the push over the last 3 years.
Yes. And maybe because I don't offer those beginner classes as much, I don't see the new shooters as often.
Okay.
I don't believe anything's changed. I mean, they're still out there and there's always a place for that. And I'm willing to, help anybody get there and do those things. So I think just maybe based on the classes that I offer, I see a change in the market. I guess.
Gotcha. The clientele has just changed a little bit based on
what we're offering,
what you're offering, and what's been happening.
Yes,
which is good to hear. I mean, and I think we're seeing the industry grow at a crazy rate. I mean, obviously, whether it comes to firearms or equipment, gear, classes, instructors that are out there, it's wide open right now. You're seeing all kinds of stuff. And that comes with pros and cons.
Yes.
We were just talking about SHOT Show before we opened up. I've been back a little over a week now. I'm finally feeling like a human. I didn't get a lot of sleep while I was there, and we were just kind of going like everybody else. It was bell to bell, full throttle, all day long. And I picked up a lot of things. It was a really great experience for me. But as I was looking around, I'm just looking at it going, damn, this thing is massive right now.
Yeah.
And again, it's opened the door for a lot of things, whether it's a product or a training session or something. Products obviously being a huge one with all the innovation that's happening, and we're in America, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is where all that, a lot of that happens, anyways. But it can bring some, let's just say, unsavory shit to the table when things grow that fast. When there's that much opportunity, obviously that much finance. What if there's anything out there that bothers you, about those kinds of things right now? What is it? I mean, from an instructor's perspective, or just from a 2A advocate citizen's perspective, a civilian's perspective.
Man, it's tough. And I was listening to your podcast with the FPC, the attorney, the other day, and you had mentioned that it's very, very difficult, especially in this state, for how often the laws change to keep up with everything.
Yeah, man.
So you're compliant with something one day, and then maybe a couple years later, some law passes, then you're not. So trying to keep up with everything is exhausting. And I don't know if that's necessarily our fault or our two-way community's fault, because that's a constant fight that we're always trying to push back on. But that is one thing that I think is very, very mentally taxing to try and keep and stay up on that. Not only as an individual that's like a gun owner, but then even as a business
I was just going to say, you're a coach. Your clients, your students are calling you, or they're texting you, or whatever. They're asking you, at the range, like, well, what about this? What about that?
Yes. Yep.
And you want to be responsible. Like, and it's the same thing I try to do here is like, let's be responsible and making sure we're bringing solid information to the table. And it's hard to say, or it seems we're more, and I have people reach out to me all the time, like, how do I get a gun? Or, hey, what's this thing that I hear going on with I thought that gun was, so we just had we've had a couple of incidents in the state in this last week. Yeah. I'm not sure when when we'll drop this episode, but hey, like that gun is supposed to be legal. Yeah. And so are the other ones that are the bad guys are using out there, those kind of things. So, well, how did we get here, man? Like, how do we change this? Well, those are the questions that you're trying to be responsible to as a, as a friend, as a, a member of the community that wants to spread, truth and facts and whatever. And obviously as a business owner, like I got to help people understand this without looking like the angry guy, right? Or the exhausted guy that seems to be doing it all the time, because that just makes them angry or makes them exhausted. Yeah.
I think too, maybe you might have been getting to this as your experience at SHOT Show. It's a huge event, and you'll meet people that you've, became friends with on social media or whatever, or people that you've never met before, and then you kind of get exposed to things. One thing that I will say is, twofolds is a few years ago, I decided to kind of slow down on the social media thing because of the politics that were going on in the world.
Nuts, yeah.
So I slowed down a lot because I just didn't want to, it was negative.
You didn't want to expose yourself to it?
Yeah, I didn't want to expose myself to it. It was negative. And honestly, and people say this a lot, if you just put your phone down, everything in the world is fine. So and then same thing kind of in the firearms community. Sometimes there's drama here and there, but I like to stay positive as well. So I don't really get entwined in if there's anything negative in the community with other companies kind of going back and forth to each other.
It's a smart play, man.
So that's just where I'm kind of trying to be in my lane and kind of do my thing and be positive and not get tied up into a lot of things that don't, support my progress in my life.
I totally appreciate and respect that, because by nature, kind of what I do, we have to spend quite a bit of time out there on social media. And I never, like, my story behind social media is I never had social media till we tripled in size at the gym. And I was like, God, we should probably use social media to drive some traffic, right?
Yeah.
And then obviously that's evolved. So, and here we are.
Yeah.
Which, and this stuff will be all over social media. It's like, it's contradictory at some level to say I hate it when we have to spend so much time doing it. But here's my question, I guess, with the, staying out of it. Why do you think people get so within the industry? Why does it get so negative? Like, what is driving that? Well, like, what's your take on that?
And without getting too crazy, I think it's just more of personalities in the industry, and to be vague, we'll just say it's like a type A personality. Like, hey, I do things my way because of my knowledge and experience, and this is not necessarily it's the right way. Any good company or instructor or coach will say there's multiple ways to do things, and that's perfectly fine. Those are the good ones that understand that and just here to help anybody else that needs help, willing to help and lend a hand. I think sometimes when there's finances involved and then growth or popularity, maybe sometimes it's one of those things where they kind of butt heads on certain things, and honestly too, it probably gets blown out of proportion by other people more so than not, and maybe people are just trying to be in their lane and push whatever product or service they're trying to do, and then somebody else trying to do the same thing, and I don't know, maybe makes them feel better to kind of knock it, passively, and then it kind of gets blown up. Maybe, I don't know. That's just my thought.
I think you're 100% right there. I was kind of, I don't know, at some level when I asked the question, maybe I was hoping that you come up with something really profound that I hadn't thought of before, or something really like deep, with the reasons why it's like that. And it isn't.
No.
It's so simple. Like, it really comes down to like ego, and feeling threatened. And yeah, I think it's like there's a fear in there somewhere of whatever that fear is for anybody. It's like it's this deep-rooted fear. And look, I get money makes people do crazy shit. Like, it's just what it does. It always has and it always will. There's no changing that. But I will say this. So rather than focusing on the negative, going to the positive, I see a lot more instructors and a lot more people in the industry and in the business doing what you just said, which is, you know what, I'm not going to get involved in that anymore. Yeah. Like, if they want to have that conversation, that argument over there, go ahead. I don't want to have that. Just hit the unfollow button if you don't like me not being involved, or my basically my positive response to a negative situation. If that's not good enough for you because you want me to get all fired up and join your team, or you want your opinion to be coming out of my mouth, that's just not how it's going to be. I see people kind of recognizing that now and carving a different path. And I also see like the consumer, the voyeur for that matter, that's kind of watching it all happen, starting to recognize it more. They're looking at it going, this is so dumb. Yeah. Like, this guy's on this guy because he says he's teaching something he shouldn't be teaching because he didn't have this particular experience that, that this other guy had. And there's this constant, it's just this constant fighting that's going back and forth. And they're looking at it going, it's off-putting. Like, it doesn't help anything. Now it's like, it's for lack of a better term, it's like these are thirsty posts. Now you're just out there trying to piss people off. And I also see other people that are like, look, that's how I wanted it to be the entire time. So when I'm talking about this, it doesn't mean I'm saying I'm talking poorly or badly about somebody else. You're making that assumption. I'm just saying, here's my thoughts on it. Yep. Right. And I'm open for discussion on it. I think the bigger part of the problem is where the discussion and how it's happening, and that being like the whole industry lives on Instagram. Yeah. It's a total disaster. I mean, you're set up for all of this stuff already. So when you say like, I put my social media aside, I mean, that's the smartest thing you can do. But do you ever go back and go, you know what? Like, if I was doing a little bit more here, doing a little bit more there on social media, maybe things would be different for me from a financial perspective with my instruction. I mean,
sometimes I do, and then I go back to Wayne. Well, is that really where I want to go with this? As far as if I want to make more money or travel across or whatever the case is. And back to, I mean, I'll be honest, I've gotten hooked and on some posts where something was posted, and then a friend or someone's like, hey, did you see this video? And they're like, oh yeah, I saw that. And then they have a beef, and I'm automatically hooked into it too. But then I just reset, and then kind of big picture is not worth it. And also too, like you said, I mean, social media, like everybody's on social media. Like, social media is all I got for this company. I mean, I got a website, I have a YouTube that I just reference videos for my classes and stuff like that. But if Instagram was gone tomorrow, I mean,
the world would be a better place, man. Yeah. I really believe it would. Yeah. I mean, there'd be another platform that would pop up, but I mean, they're talking about like TikTok going away potentially, which is great. Fine. Yeah. Everybody will just move to a different platform, or they'll start a new one. It just is where we are in evolution. So there's some level of acceptance that you have to have, but you have to decide, set boundaries and how you're going to handle it and how you're going to handle yourself. By the way, going back about getting caught up and getting sucked in, there's not a person listening to this or that has social media on their phone or whatever that hasn't gone there. I mean, that's what it's designed to do.
I think the best thing, and I've done this too, is if I see something, like I saw another company, they're advertising a product that I have a little bit of experience in, but for me, in my experience of what I do professionally, I didn't see, and actually this may be another thing, it is a preaching product. And we didn't mention this before, but my experience with the fire service and preaching and forcible entry, we'll say, for the fire service and preaching in the military, or military and law enforcement. So I have a little bit of experience as a SWAT medic for the city that I work with. Okay. So I'm a medic on the SWAT team, and so we do warrants and stuff. So we do breaching. Okay. weekly on warrants. So I say that to say my experience or my thought, and I saw another breaching company promoting a product that in my experience, I did not see the value or what was the value in it or in certain scenarios. I said, what would you use this for specifically in what scenario? And I kind of got like a cold, short answer that wasn't really valuable.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if maybe whoever it was just kind of said, maybe thought I was
attacking them or something.
Yeah.
Or didn't have the
answer. But I did it in a private message too. So it's not like a comment on the post where everybody blows up. It's just, hey, I saw this product. I saw you doing this. This is my experience with it. What value, is there any other thing that I'm missing that you have seen where it's valuable to use?
So this is the problem with these types of messages, right? Because you're asking it in a legit, like respectful kind of way. And somebody else sees that on the other side and they can take that completely into whatever context they see it as.
Yeah. So I got a short answer and then I was like, okay, that's wasn't helpful.
Yeah. So that's again, the platform and the way we're doing this is it's short answers back and forth, and somewhere in there, like the shortness gets shorter and people can take it, you know. The other thing they're trying to do, let's go back to the learning. I mean, you mentioned, so we're go back to this learning and success model, right? And all the things that you have to have and skill sets and knowledge and where you're getting that from. It seems more and more and more. You mentioned things like reading books.
Yeah.
Who the fuck reads books anymore? You know, like, they all want to go and they want to get it from, you know, a 2-minute YouTube video or a 30-second Instagram reel or whatever else. And I think that's a bigger problem that leads to a shorter conversation. Yep. And then, you know, when you're asking somebody a question, like rather than them say, give you a rationale as to why or what or whatever the question is, it's a short response that then you're left to interpret as, this guy pissed at me?
Yeah.
Like, and that's like almost the automatic response now. And I see that happening kind of across the board. It's nauseating. Like I just look at it and go, God, everybody's so appears to be so sensitive. Yet if you had a one-on-one conversation with them, go, I'm not sensitive about it at all. Like, whether they are or aren't, that's usually the first response. So it's so opposite.
And obviously the goal is to learn on both sides. If he had something that was beneficial or a value that I did not know, which was what I was asking.
There was an opportunity there.
Exactly. Oh, cool. I did not know that. And then here's my experience. And then we both grow at the same time. But it you know, I don't know if it's maybe, and it may have just been a bad time, ego, or maybe they're just busy with something else. So
again, you're left with all these things out in space, right? To try and decipher, and then that brings in people internalize that shit, and the next thing there's feelings involved, rather than I just wanted a little bit of knowledge or an answer to a very simple question.
Point being is that within the community, another thing, politics, if you're just positive in every aspect, you'll be better off either way. I
couldn't agree with you more. And that going back to the SHOT Show experience, I chose that going in and heard a lot of things from a lot of people. It was interesting what people will share.
Yeah.
You know, like as you're out in booths and you're, you know, like being social at the dinner table or at the bar or whatever, smoking cigars, whatever we happen to do, the type of information and how comfortable people will be at sharing it with you, you know, and a lot of times it's like, dude, did you really need to say that? Like that really doesn't, that's not helpful, right? It's not valuable. Like, are you just testing me for my reaction and see how I'm going to respond? But I chose going into that, like, I'm not going to get involved in this stuff because I really have no business in any of it. So I think if more people made that choice to just be like, we need to make this better. And sometimes that means just leaving it the F alone. Let's just not even go there.
Yeah.
But speaking of being better and being positive and trying to bring positive to the community and to the people that are looking to gain those skill sets and that knowledge and all those things, let's talk about what you're doing, like, as we go into this year. I mean, it's a brand new year. We talked about kind of roaring through the end of, this always happens every year. Like, the end of the year, there's always some event, right? And then you get right into the holidays and we're juggling all the things and we're almost in February already.
Yeah.
What does the rest of the year look like for you in these aspects? Like, number one, what's going to happen with TSI? Like, what do you do, you know, in terms of schedules and how do you organize that? And then the other question is, like, what do you do specifically for you and your own development? I mean, obviously you put a lot of thought into, you know, the success formula and putting that together and explaining that. But what do you do in your own success formula in terms of skill sets, knowledge, fitness, and all that going forward? So 2 big questions.
2 big questions. So TSI is going, and I always do this every time the end of the year comes up. I'm little. It's a push at the end of the year just to get through the year. So good companies are already planning and have their schedule planned out before the year ends.
Yep.
Me, on the other hand, no. Like, I take the holidays to take my break for the end of the year, and then once that's done, I'm okay. Now what are we going to do this year? I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing for business, but that's just how I do it.
I don't think it's wrong. I mean, I don't think you should be like relegated to a specific calendar unless there's a season that's really important. But in this industry, I don't think that really exists. Fitness industry, a little different. Like, I got to be thinking about stuff in October to make sure that we're ready, because that's just generally how the seasons flow. But I also know that the season here that's happened here in our specific market over time, particularly all the stuff that's happened in the last 3 years or so, is a little bit later. It starts a little bit later. It's not necessarily January 1 for fitness, right? It's or January 2nd after New Year's Day. It gets pushed out a little bit. So we've massaged that. So, but I get it. I don't necessarily think it's a wrong thing, because if what you did was took the time down, to really recharge the batteries and get yourself settled and be in a really good position to come out strong, like, I don't think that's a bad thing at all. Business wise, I think it's really smart.
So 2023, I mean, we're just going to keep doing about a class a month is about average. I got some things planned. So I used to teach with Kyle and TJ at Core Vision Core Vision Training up in Washington. They got a facility up there. Awesome dudes. So I learned from them. Met with them. I'd taken some classes through them down in Southern California. And then I went up to Washington, and then started teaching with them. So I taught a couple classes with them up in Washington. And then a couple years ago, I was contracting with them to teach their classes in California.
Okay, gotcha.
So, anyways, there's talk about, we got something planned coming probably August, working with them again. So we're going to do a combo of, so they're really good. TJ and Kyle, CQB, their structure assessment class, they do active defense, which I've helped teach. So they're well skilled in CQB, so we're going to combine those two with the CQB and the door breaching coming up. So
that's unique.
Yeah, working with them here in California locally. So it'll be down in Stockton area. Okay. And potentially maybe going to Texas too. So other than those 2 things, everything is just kind of local stuff around
the regular,
here.
So what would be typical for you in terms of the classes that you mentioned before?
Yep.
I think that schedule makes a lot of sense, because, again, you're a full-time firefighter. Yeah. So there's a balance that you have to strike there in terms of being home on the weekends for family and yourself, and take care of your own stuff, right? So any more than that, are you really walking into class prepared to teach? I think that's important. Like, as a coach, like, you really sometimes you have to work at getting up for a session. Yeah. Like, there's other things that are happening, around you. I have like coaches that walk into the gym every day at 5 a.m., and 5 a.m. over time can, depending on what happened the day before or what you got happening later in the day, you might not be at 100%. Sometimes you got to get yourself up, so if you're working full time and juggling life and family and all that stuff, like, doing more than that, I'm sure could be very overwhelming, especially if you're traveling, which I know. I know a lot of coaches or instructors that are, they're literally on the road 3 weeks out of the month. That's hard. I've done that actually. It's very tough. So
yeah, that's something I'm not. Like I said, I like teaching, and I do at work too. I've taught our one of our academies, and then we do it anyways with newer guys on the job. Constantly teaching and sharing knowledge, which I enjoy. Like I said, I like to help people progress to whatever their goal that is. So doing that with TSI allows me to do that in something else I'm passionate about, but I do value being home with the family, and so not traveling is very attractive to me.
So. I hear that. So that doesn't leave, we look at all that. That's a lot of stuff, man. Yeah. So where does that leave time for you for your own development, right? And you pushing yourself in all of those things, again, fitness, skill set, knowledge. How do you balance that? What would the plan look like?
So, So physical fitness, working out in the gym. I mean, I used to be a member of CrossFit. We moved and I don't do that anymore, but I do home gym stuff.
Okay.
So home gym stuff at work, we have a gym. So working out at home. The cool thing is if you teach an academy, you're working out every single day. So that takes care of that point for you.
That's great.
Yeah.
On the clock too.
Yep. As far as skill set wise, I evaluate myself in things that I know I need improvement on. Like if it's just simple, I'll tell you, as an instructor, or a coach, you always have to be, and you're teaching people, you always have to be proficient because not always, you always have to be proficient. Sometimes things happen when you mess up or fumble something, whatever the case, it is what it is. But something that I try to do is identify what I need need to be worked on fundamentally, that I know that I can be better at. And then if something comes along the way where, I don't know, I see a class or another instructor that says, yeah, I think I need to know.
Seems interesting
to me. Then I'll sign up for the class or I know that I need more work in. So
I love that.
Yeah.
Like it's fundamentals, right? I mean, it's always working the fundamentals, identifying where you can improve on the fundamentals, and then occasionally reaching out to challenge yourself with something that looks interesting or you haven't done before. And that's kind of the way where my training has evolved to now. Like there's all kinds of neat stuff out there. Again, your class is one of those things. Like this is one of those things like, hey, I have an opportunity. I'm at California Range Weekend. Like Nate's here. I saw this thing a little over a year ago. It was almost amazed. Like, I saw the Bear Solutions stuff when we were out at California Range Day up in Lincoln or whatever. Maybe it was the year before. I can't remember. I feel like that was 2020, 21. Yeah. All the years are running together now. Yep. And so when it came up, I was like, no, I got to do this. I'm gonna try this. But that's very atypical of me. I'll usually get into the very fundamental type stuff and keep working those things and learning the new little skill sets within the fundamentals. I think people are always trying to reach, not always. I think a lot of people are reaching out for like, what's the next thing? Yeah. What's the next thing? Yeah. What's the next thing? And so I feel like the longer you're in this journey, the more you understand how what you just said is so important. And then that self-realization of what is it that I'm not good at? What is it that I need to practice? And so it doesn't mean like I have to sign up for the 6 classes a year or whatever. Once you get to a certain point, you know what you need to do. It's like working out. Yeah. Initially, it feels weird. Like it can feel really awkward. You feel like you're supposed to know more, so you're constantly out there doing more. And eventually you reach like this point, I think, or you should reach a point where you're like, okay, now I pushed it beyond my headlights. And I understand the fundamentals here. Anything else comes in with that situational stuff, and what should I be actually training for based on, say, my use case? And there's nothing wrong, like I said, with throwing in like an out of the ordinary type of thing. But I think it's super important for people, particularly like the end user consumer, to hear that from coaches. Yeah. And the more conversations I have with more of the experienced coaches that do a good job with, I guess, articulating this kind of stuff, they're practicing what they're preaching, and they're not trying to reinvent the wheel, man.
Right. So one of the things how the way my mind works, and I've been told this at work, maybe a technical kind of guy, but more so for me, it's more analytical. So if I see something that, if a guy is going to do a drill or whatever, and he does it really good, really fast, really efficient, well, I'll break that down to figure out why, or how is he doing it so well. And if I can, and it's just like me being mechanically inclined. That's why I say analytical. If I'm gonna build a motor, like I got a couple old cars and trucks at the house that I'm building right now. Tore this whole thing down. I'm gonna put it back together, and it's not my first car or truck that I built, but it's something for me to understand, how everything works and how I can. If I understand how something works or how somebody else does things or how I do things, that's why video is great, to record yourself doing a drill or whatever the case is, so you can break things down, and then being able to translate that to somebody else and explain what you're doing and giving them specific cues of what you want them to accomplish, because you understand what it takes, but also being a good coach, you have to understand the individual and the student of how they are receiving that information and absorbing it, and then how to communicate that to them to where they can understand it and then do what you're trying to teach them to do. So I think being analytical on things is something that I think is important for me.
I could not agree with you more. I'm really glad you said that. There's nothing wrong with being analytical. And I think, you look at that and you go, like, that's what nerds do, right? They start to break things down. They really dig into the detail. And again, the good ones will do that. And you need to be analytical, but also understand that the person you're teaching that's just in there to learn, how to shoot a firearm for the first time may not be that person.
Right.
And there are different learning styles, and they're going to absorb that information, digest it, then absorb it. And then you're going to see the outcome of that in a very, very different way. And that constant evolution of learning how things work at a little bit different level allows you to have those different conversations with those different people wherever they're coming to you. And I'll end the sentence with at, like wherever they're at, like you have to meet them in order to provide them a high level of value. And that's getting missed. But it's getting missed by a lot of instructors because, again, I've talked about this before, like the barrier of entry to become an instructor is very low. Basically, I'm an instructor and, walk onto the range and yours was an organic process. You were already teaching, you were already doing things as a firefighter or whatever in your previous life, military and everything else. So it kind of evolved. I think that's an important statement to make. It's been made here on this show by a lot of other people, and that is just because you can doesn't mean you should be teaching it. And so to the consumer, think about that. Like if you're listening to this before you go out and decide to take a class, really ask some questions. And I always encourage people to reach out to the person that they're going to sign up for. Don't just randomly fucking sign up for a class. Like, how do people do that with you? Like, is it like, how do you put it out there? Because you already said, like, I don't spend a lot of time on social media. So how do you engage or interact? And I think this is both for the consumer and for the coach. It's coming out from the same angle you are. Like, dude, I don't have that much time. I don't have that much energy. And I don't want to get involved in that phone because that phone fucks me up.
A lot of times it's like today, last night, somebody reached out, said, hey, I want to take a class. I'm interested. Can I have some more information? I said, yeah, for sure. And send me an email. I'll give you all the information you want. One, it weeds out if they can send me an email and then articulate what exactly, because like on Instagram, it's like quick, easy, like short stuff. Like
I can't even decipher half the shit.
If they take the time to write an email out, I can answer it and then give them, try and help them out what they're asking for, what they're looking for. But I think the other thing too is having events like CRW, like being networking. Networking 100% is the biggest thing I believe to kind of help, spread the word on, who you are, what you're trying to do, or what your experiences are, what you're about, I guess. And then not only that, and as far as outreach of clientele and marketing, you're also networking with other instructors like Jerry from Triple Feed and those guys, which I've met. I've known him for a couple of years now, but and those alike, you know what I mean? So coming together, and I think that's why CRW and those things are a great event, because it brings a bunch of instructors together to kind of hang out and talk to each other and then just be around. I think networking and just having big groups and events like that is huge.
Yeah, what ends up happening with that too is all those short conversations and that taking things out of context and not really understand. That all goes away. It all goes away because you get to have those longer conversations and you look somebody face to face and you shake a real hand and you do all that stuff. That CRW's been a hugely influential event for me in a lot of ways. And I wish there were more of those events here. And I know I've talked to a lot of people actually across the country that are looking to try and establish events in other places. I was just talking to Sean from Exoteric Group out in Georgia, and he's putting Atlanta Range Day together. And I was like so stoked to hear that because they don't have anything like that out there.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And there's so many amazing instructors. I mean, that was one of the things I've gotten over the last few months, has really made some connections in like the Southeast, Sean being one of those guys. And they're going to be bringing like the best of the best in. So if you're a consumer, like, dude, I mean, the concentration of talent and fun, and instruction is going to be very, very high concentration. And California is massive, right? And I feel like, we could be doing these things regionally to really help people, bring more awareness, but also break down these barriers of like what's good, what isn't, who's, what's important, what isn't. It's not to say that somebody's view on something isn't important, but just like what should we be focused on in order to grow things? in a healthy, kind of progressive kind of way. That might be a word that scares people.
Yeah.
But no, I think it needs to progress. And so these questions started with, the last part of this started with like, what are you doing to evolve? What are you doing to stay relevant?
Mm-hmm.
And, interesting that what you said is one of the things you should be doing as an instructor is getting together with a lot of other instructors.
Yeah.
When so many people are trying to play it close to the chest,
yes.
which then ends up coming back to what we were saying before about it being negative.
Yeah.
Right. And the garbage that goes back and forth.
Yeah. That's why I like working with Kyle and Core Vision and other companies, Nick from Core Vision Industries. I mean, those guys, and that's how, and then, I mean, there's tons. I would say Zach from Trauma RN, he's on the East Coast or Midwest now, but tons of companies, tons of guys I met over the years that we've always been just, there's always, like, we always clicked, and the more you do that, the more people you get exposed to, and the better off, you're going to be, I think. You help each other out 100%. Hey, I'll go teach a class down in Southern California, and just randomly I'll know somebody there that I've worked with or trained with before. Hey man, you want to be my range master today or help me out and be a safety officer? Yeah, no problem. And then have like Kevin, like he's done it twice with me down there.
Yep.
And I'm having him do demos, but like we don't hang out anytime other throughout the year. But when I see him, they're like, hey, what's up, Kevin? He's, prior Marine as well. And then I know that like I can count on him to be there, and he's more than willing to help. Yeah,
valuable experiences. I think so. If you're a consumer, you're new to the shooting world, and you're looking for instruction, and you're working through it. I think listening to Nate right now and what he's saying, think about that when you're thumbing through your Instagram feed and you're listening to, whether it's a video or a reel or something like that, or reading what people are putting out and how they're this being instructors and maybe other consumers that are putting out stuff about other instructors and how it's being put out there. Because I honestly believe in again, I said this at the beginning, like good people hang out with good people, man.
Yeah.
And the good people are not spending a lot of time being negative or they're calling attention to things and then they're just leaving it alone. They're walking away from it. So if you're a consumer that's getting caught up in this, well, this guy over here seems like the dominant, alpha, and he's got these credentials and whatever else. And if he's got if that person is doing that and using those credentials and trying to be that dominant person, chances are they're doing that because they've alienated themselves and found themselves a little bit alone out there.
Yeah.
And that is probably a red flag. So I would think twice about going there. Maybe go a few other places first so that when you go there, you have something to compare and contrast to.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people get kind of caught up in that as consumers or people that are new to the community. So yeah, those are really good points.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I just try to be open to helping anybody. Same with guys that I've met and kind of worked with over the years. Just being positive, and anytime anybody needs anything, just help them out whatever I can do.
Seems to be a common theme with dudes like you, man.
Yeah.
So if people want to reach out to you or get a hold of you, find out more about what you're doing with TSI, maybe how they sign up for a course, or just throw you a question or whatever. How do they get a hold of you, man?
The easiest way is if you don't have my phone number, Instagram. So Nate TSI Core on Instagram. I got a website. And YouTube, but YouTube's not very active. I just got a few videos that I reference for class stuff. But the easiest way is Instagram. Email too. training@tsicore.com if you have anything else. But more personally would be Instagram. Okay,
cool. So while it's not something you spend a ton of time putting stuff up on, it's something you monitor and people can get a hold of you there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's a powerful tool. Again, there are positives to it. All right, you heard it, everybody. Reach out to Nate if you got questions or if you want to take a course. I highly recommend. If you've been in the shooting community for a while and you have some proficiency, go check out the mechanical breaching course. It's a lot of fun. If it comes to town for you, it's a ton of fun, and you'll learn a lot, and it'll be physical. And Nate's a good dude. I appreciate you coming over, man.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. That's good. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out. Like I said, I'm not sure quite when we'll have this up, but I'm looking forward to putting it out there and people getting to know you a little bit better than maybe they did already.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks, brother.
Yep, thank you.